The massive silver ship dropped out of hyperspace with a flash of blue light that lit up the darkness around Nexus Prime. The planet looked like a giant metal ball covered in glowing cities and spaceports. Thousands of smaller ships moved around. It like busy insects carrying new cadets from every corner of the galaxy to the most famous military academy in known space. Hyunwoo pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship and watched as they got closer to the planet. His heart was beating fast with excitement and fear. He was only 19 years old and had never been this far from Earth. The other humans on the ship looked just as nervous as he felt. Yoonji sat across from him reading a data pad about alien species, while Taemin was trying to sleep but kept fidgeting in his seat. The Academy of Stars was built into the side of a massive mountain that reached up into the clouds. The buildings were made of some kind of black metal that seemed to absorb light, rather than reflect it. Huge windows showed training rooms where they could see tiny figures moving around inside. Even from space, the Academy looked scary and impressive, like it was designed to make new cadets feel small and weak. When their ship finally landed at the Academy spaceport, Hyunwoo got his first real look at the other species he would be training with. A group of Vorthak warriors walked past, and each one was nearly 8 feet tall, with thick gray skin that looked like natural armor. Their arms were as thick as tree trunks, and their hands ended in sharp black claws that could probably cut through metal. The smallest Vorthak was still twice as big as the biggest human. Behind them came a squad of Zephyrians who moved with impossible grace on their 4 arms. They could run on 2 arms while using the other 2 to carry weapons or equipment. Their skin was bright blue and covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change as Hyunwoo watched them. One of them noticed him staring, and all 4 arms moved in what might have been a wave, or might have been a threat. The crystalline beings were even stranger. They looked like they were made of living diamond, and when they moved, they made soft ringing sounds like wind, chimes. Each one was perfectly transparent so you could see right through them to the other side, but somehow they still cast shadows. Their voices sounded like music when they talked to each other in their own language. A group of nebula-born cadets floated past without even touching the ground. Their bodies looked like they were made of colored smoke that held together in roughly human shape, but kept shifting and changing. They could make parts of themselves solid when they needed to pick things up, but mostly they just drifted around like living clouds. Hyunwoo felt very small and very human as he followed the other new arrivals toward the academy entrance. The building was even bigger up close, with doors that were at least 20 feet tall to accommodate the largest species. Everything was built on a scale that made humans look like children visiting a place designed for giants. The main entrance hall was packed with hundreds of new cadets from dozens of different species. The noise was incredible because every species made different sounds when they talked. Some clicked and hissed, others made musical tones, and a few just communicated by changing the colors of their skin. The humans stayed close together like a small island in a sea of aliens. Instructor Kravex appeared on a raised platform at the front of the hall, and the noise died away instantly. He was a Drachnor, which meant he looked like a cross between a dragon and a giant lizard. His scales were black, as space, and his eyes glowed red when he looked out over the crowd of new cadets. When he spoke, his voice was so deep it seemed to come from underground. "Welcome to the Academy of Stars," he said. "You are here because your governments believe you have the potential to become warriors worthy of defending the galaxy. Most of you are wrong. In the next 6 months, we will discover who among you has the strength, courage, and intelligence to join the Galactic Defense Force. The rest will go home in shame." He pointed one clawed finger at different groups of cadets as he continued speaking. "The Vorthak come here because they are born warriors with natural weapons and armor. The Zephyrians bring speed and agility that few can match. The crystalline beings are nearly indestructible, and the nebula-born can become invisible at will. Every species here has natural advantages that have been proven in combat. Then his red eyes fixed on the small group of humans, and Hyunwoo felt like the instructor was looking directly at him. "Humans," he said with what might have been amusement in his voice. "You have no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. Your species has been part of the galactic community for less than 50 years. You are weak, slow, and fragile compared to every other species in this room." The other cadets turned to stare at the humans, and Hyunwoo could hear some of them making sounds that were probably laughter in their own languages. His face turned red with embarrassment, but he forced himself to stand up straight and look back at Instructor Kravex without backing down. However, the instructor continued, "Humans have one thing that might make up for their many weaknesses. You refuse to give up even when giving up would be the smart thing to do. Your species has a history of fighting wars against impossible odds, and sometimes winning through sheer stubbornness. We will see if that is enough to make warriors out of you." The speech went on for another hour, covering the rules of the academy, the training schedule, and the consequences of failure. Cadets who could not keep up would be sent home immediately. There would be no second chances and no special treatment for any species. The academy had been turning out the galaxy's best warriors for over 1,000 years, and they were not going to lower their standards now. When the speech finally ended, the new cadets were divided into training groups. Hyunwoo found himself assigned to Group 7, along with Yoonji and Tae-min, plus 12 alien cadets of various species. Their dormitory was a long room with beds built to accommodate different body types. The human beds looked tiny compared to the massive frames built for the Vorthakas they settled in for their first night. Hyunwoo could hear the other species talking about the humans in their own languages. He did not need a translator to understand the tone. They were making fun of the weak little creatures from Earth who thought they could train alongside real warriors. Tomorrow, the real training would begin, and Hyunwoo wondered if Instructor Kravex was right about humans refusing to give up. He had a feeling he was going to find out very soon. The lights went out at exactly 2200 hours Galactic Standard Time, but Hyunwoo lay awake for a long time listening to the strange sounds the other species made while they slept. Some snored, some clicked, and one of them made a sound like flowing water. He was thousands of light years from home, surrounded by beings who could probably kill him without even trying hard, but somehow he was not ready to give up before he had even started. Tomorrow would bring the first day of real training and his first chance to prove that humans belonged in the Academy of Stars. The alarm screamed through the dormitory at 0500 hours Galactic Time, yanking every cadet from whatever sleep they had managed to find. Hyunwoo rolled out of his narrow bed and grabbed his training uniform, while around him the alien cadets moved with practiced efficiency. The Vorthak were already fully awake and stretching their massive limbs, while the Zephyrians were doing some kind of four-armed exercise. Routine breakfast was served in the main cafeteria, which was another reminder of how different all the species were. The food dispensers had dozens of different options to accommodate every possible dietary requirement. Hyunwoo got something that looked like eggs and bread while watching a crystalline cadet absorb some kind of liquid directly through their skin. A nebula-born student simply floated near an energy field and seemed to feed off the radiation. The first training session was scheduled for 0700 in Combat Arena. 5 Instructor Kravex was waiting when they arrived, along with several other instructors from different species. The arena was a huge circular room with a soft mat covering the floor and weapons racks along the walls. High up on the walls were viewing windows where older cadets had gathered to watch the new recruits get their first taste of real training. "Today, we will begin with basic combat assessment," announced Instructor Kravex. "You will be paired randomly with other cadets to test your natural fighting abilities. Do not try to impress anyone. Simply fight to the best of your current ability. We need to know what we are working with before we can begin proper training." A holographic display appeared in the center of the arena showing the fighting pairs. Hyunwoo felt his stomach drop when he saw his name paired with a Zephyrian cadet called Vex. The blue-skinned alien was smaller than the Vorthak, but still taller than any human, and those 4 arms would be a nightmare to deal with in close combat. The first few matches were brutal to watch. A Vorthak cadet fought against a crystalline warrior, and the sound of claws scraping against diamond skin echoed through the arena. Neither one seemed to take any real damage, but the power behind. Their strikes would have killed a human instantly. A Nebula-born student faced off against another Vorthak and kept shifting between solid and gaseous form to avoid the heavy punches. When Hyunwoo's turn came, he stepped onto the mat trying to remember. Everything he had learned about hand-to-hand combat back on Earth, Vex moved to the opposite side of the fighting circle, and all 4 arms began moving in a complex pattern that was probably some kind of Zephyrian warm-up routine. The instructor gave the signal to begin, and Vex immediately rushed forward, moving faster than Hyunwoo had expected. The first punch came from the upper left arm, and Hyunwoo managed to block it, but then the upper right arm hit him in the ribs, while the lower arms grabbed his legs. The next thing he knew, he was flying through the air and landing hard on his back. He rolled away just in time to avoid 4 fists slamming into the mat where his head had been a second before Vex was already moving again, using 2 arms to run while the other 2 reached for Hyunwoo like grasping tentacles. Every time Hyunwoo tried to get close enough to strike back, those 4 arms created a barrier that he could not get through. The fight lasted less than 2 minutes before Hyunwoo found himself pinned to the mat with 2 arms holding his shoulders down and the other 2 positioned to strike his face if he kept struggling. The instructor called the match, and Vex released him with what might have been a dismissive gesture. Hyunwoo climbed to his feet, feeling bruised and embarrassed. While the watching cadets made sounds that were definitely laughter, Yoonji fought next against a crystalline warrior named Prism. The match was over even faster than Hyunwoo's had been. Every punch and kick that Yoonji threw simply bounced off the diamond hard skin without doing any damage. Meanwhile, every hit from Prism felt like being struck by a hammer made of stone. Yoonji lasted about 90 seconds before she was knocked unconscious and had to be carried to the medical bay. Taemin faced a Nebula-born cadet in the strangest fight any of them had ever seen. His opponent kept shifting between solid and gaseous states so that punches would pass right through empty air. Then suddenly the Nebula-born would become solid, just long enough to land a hit before becoming smoke again. Taemin spent most of the fight swinging at empty space while getting hit by an opponent he could barely see. By the time all the matches were finished, every single human cadet had been defeated. Most of them had not even managed to land a single hit on their opponents. The alien cadets were talking excitedly among themselves, and Hyunwoo could tell they were discussing how pathetic the human performance had been. The next few days followed the same pattern. Physical fitness tests showed that humans were among the weakest species in their training group. Even the smallest aliens could lift twice what the strongest. Human could manage speed trials were even worse because species with multiple legs or natural flight abilities left the humans looking like they were moving in slow motion. Strength competitions were the most humiliating of all. Hyunwoo watched a Vorthak cadet casually lift a weight that took 3 humans working together to even budge. A crystalline student picked up the same weight with one hand while reading a data pad with the other. Even some of the smaller alien species, who looked delicate, turned out to be incredibly strong compared to humans. The only area where humans showed any competence was in the academic portions of their training. When they had to study tactics, strategy, and alien anatomy, the humans scored as well as anyone else. But intelligence tests meant nothing in a military academy that focused on producing elite combat soldiers. Raw physical ability was what mattered most, and humans were failing badly in every category. Word spread quickly through the academy about the terrible performance of the human cadets. Older students from advanced classes began visiting the training areas, specifically to watch the humans fail. Betting pools opened up on which human would quit first and go home to Earth. The general consensus was that none of them would last more than 2 weeks. Hyunwoo lay in his narrow bed listening to his alien roommates discuss the day's training in their own languages. He did not need to understand the words to know they were, talking about how weak and useless the humans were becoming. The worst part was that he was starting to agree with them. Maybe humans really did not belong among the galaxy's warriors. Every morning brought new challenges that the humans were not equipped to handle. Every evening brought fresh humiliation as they fell further behind their alien classmates. The instructors had stopped expecting anything from the human cadets and were focusing their attention on students who actually showed promise. But something deep inside Hyunwoo refused to accept defeat, even when logic told him he should quit and go home. His body might be weaker than the aliens around him, but his mind was still working, and his spirit had not been broken yet. Tomorrow would bring another day of training and another chance to prove that humans belonged in the Academy of Stars, even if he had no idea how he was going to do it. The other human cadets were starting to talk about giving up and requesting transport back to Earth, but Hyunwoo was not ready to surrender. Yet there had to be something that humans could do better than these alien species, something that their instructors had not discovered yet. He just had to figure out what it was before his time ran out. 3 weeks into training, the Academy instructors decided it was time for advanced team exercises. The new cadets were divided into mixed species squads that would have to work together to complete complex military objectives under extreme conditions. This was supposed to teach them how different species could combine their natural abilities to become more effective. As a unit, Hyunwoo found himself assigned to Squad Delta along with 5 alien cadets who clearly did not want him there. The squad leader was Goroth, a massive Vorthak warrior who stood nearly 9 feet tall and had arms like tree trunks covered in natural armor plating. His claws were longer than Hyunwoo's fingers and looked sharp enough to cut through steel without any effort. Thus, other squad members were just as intimidating. A Zephyrian scout named Kex, who could run on walls and ceilings using all 4 arms. A crystalline heavy weapons specialist called Shard, whose diamond skin could deflect most energy weapons. A Nebula-born infiltration expert named Drift, who could become completely invisible. A fast-moving insectoid called Click, whose 6 legs made him the fastest runner in their training class. The first exercise was supposed to be simple. The squad had to cross a obstacle course that included climbing walls, jumping over pits, crawling through narrow tunnels, and solving puzzles under time pressure. Each team member was expected to use their natural abilities to help the group succeed where individual effort would fail. From the very beginning, everything went wrong. Hyunwoo could not climb the 20-foot walls fast enough to keep up with his teammates who could either fly, float, or use multiple limbs to scale vertical surfaces. When they reached the jumping section, his human legs could not cover the distances that were easy for aliens with longer limbs or natural flight abilities. The crawling section was even worse because it was designed for species that could compress their bodies or change shape. Hyunwoo got stuck halfway through a tunnel that Drift could flow through like water, while Click could fold his 6 legs to become much smaller. The puzzle section required different types of thinking, and Hyunwoo's human logic did not match. The alien problem-solving methods Gorath grew more frustrated with every failure. His culture valued strength, honor, and efficiency above all else, and being held back by what he saw as a weak, inferior creature was becoming unbearable for him. The other squad members began making comments in their own languages that Hyunwoo could tell were not complimentary. The second exercise involved stealth infiltration of a mock enemy base. Each squad member had to use their special abilities to get past different types of security systems. The Nebula-born could become invisible. The Zephyrian could climb through ventilation systems. The crystalline being could absorb energy weapons, and the insectoid could fit through tiny spaces. Hyunwoo had no special abilities to contribute. He was not invisible, could not fly, could not change shape, and had no natural armor or weapons. He tried to help by carrying equipment and keeping watch, but even those simple tasks seemed to go wrong. Every mistake he made put the entire squad at risk and made his teammates more angry. During the third exercise, which involved combat against automated defense drones, Hyunwoo finally reached his breaking point. The drones were fast and heavily armed, designed to test each species' natural combat abilities. His alien teammates engaged them with claws, energy blasts, multiple limbs, and natural armor, while Hyunwoo could only hide behind cover and try not to get killed. One of the drones targeted him specifically, and he had to dive behind a barrier to avoid being hit. His sudden movement distracted Gorath at a critical moment, causing the Vorthak warrior to take a training blast that would have been a fatal hit in real combat. The exercise ended with Squad Delta receiving the lowest possible score due to Hyunwoo's inability to contribute effectively. That evening, during the post-exercise briefing in front of all the cadet squads, Gorath finally lost his temper. He stood up to his full imposing height and pointed one massive clawed finger directly at Hyunwoo. While his voice echoed through the assembly hall, "This human is a liability," he declared in his deep, rumbling voice. "He has no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities of any kind. He cannot climb, cannot jump, cannot fight, and cannot contribute anything useful to a military unit. His species is too weak and too primitive to belong in this academy." Other alien cadets began nodding their heads and voicing agreement. A group of crystalline warriors talked about how human fragility made them unsuitable for combat roles. Several Zephyrians made clicking sounds that indicated strong approval of Gorath's speech. Even the normally peaceful, ethereal beings suggested that humans should be assigned to support positions far from any actual danger. The criticism spread through the assembled cadets like wildfire. Every species present seemed to have something negative to say about human capabilities: their slowness, their weakness, their lack of natural weapons, their primitive technology, their short lifespans. Everything about humanity became a target for ridicule and contempt. Instructor. Kravex listened to the complaints without comment, but Hyunwoo could see something calculating in the reptilian instructor's glowing red eyes. The other instructors were taking notes and whispering among themselves as if they were reconsidering whether humans should be allowed to continue training at the academy. Hyunwoo sat in silence while the verbal assault continued around him. His fists were clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white, but he forced himself not to respond with anger. Yoonji and Tai-min looked just as devastated as he felt as they listened to their entire species being dismissed as evolutionary failures. The worst part was that much of what the aliens were saying was true. Humans were weaker, slower, and more fragile than every other species at the academy. They had no natural weapons or armor, no special abilities that could give them an advantage in combat. Their technology was primitive compared to civilizations that had been exploring space for thousands of years. As the meeting finally ended and the cadets began filing out of the assembly hall, Hyunwoo wondered if coming to the academy had been a terrible mistake. Maybe humans really were not ready to join the galactic military. Maybe they needed another few hundred years of evolution before they could compete with species that had been bred for warfare. But even as doubt filled his mind, something stubborn deep inside refused to accept defeat. His human ancestors had faced impossible odds before and had somehow found ways to survive and prosper. They had fought wars against enemies with better weapons, better training, and better technology, but they had never given up completely. Tomorrow would bring another day of training and another chance to prove himself. He did not know how he was going to do it, but he was not ready to quit and go home to Earth just because a bunch of aliens thought humans were too weak to be soldiers. The academy had not broken his spirit yet, and he intended to keep fighting until they either accepted him or threw him out by force. Gorath passed by his seat as the hall emptied and looked down at him with contempt in his alien eyes. "You should quit while you still have some dignity left, human," he growled in his deep voice. "Your species does not belong here, and everyone knows it." Hyun-woo looked up at the towering Vorthak warrior and felt something dangerous stirring in his chest. "Maybe we will see about that," he replied quietly, not backing down from the aliens. Intimidating Stergoreth snorted with amusement and walked away. But Hyun-woo noticed that several other cadets had heard the exchange and were now looking at him with new interest. Maybe it was time to show these aliens what humans were really capable of when they were pushed too far. The individual combat rankings were scheduled for the next morning, and every cadet knew this would determine their status for the rest of their time at the academy. The rankings affected everything from meal privileges to dormitory assignments, creating a clear hierarchy based purely on fighting ability. Those at the top would get the best training opportunities, while those at the bottom would be treated like failures. Hyun-woo was matched against Thane, a mid-level Vorthak warrior known throughout the academy for his aggressive fighting style and complete lack of mercy toward opponents. He considered beneath him. Thane was not as massive as Gorath, but he was still nearly 8 feet tall, with thick gray skin and claws that could tear through most materials. The match was scheduled for the main combat arena, which meant hundreds of spectators would be watching from the viewing galleries. Word had spread about the pathetic human who thought he could fight real warriors, and the betting pools were focused on how quickly Thane would end the fight. Most aliens were wagering that Hyun-woo would not last 30 seconds as Hyun-woo walked toward the arena. He could hear the crowd already gathering in the stands. The sounds were different from human spectators because every alien species made noise in their own way. Some clicked and hissed, others made musical tones, and a few communicated by changing the colors of their skin. The overall effect was like walking into a zoo full of predators. The arena itself was a perfect circle, 50 feet across, with a soft mat covering the floor to prevent serious injuries during training fights. Weapons racks lined the walls, but this would be an unarmed combat match testing natural fighting ability rather than skill with tools. High above them, the viewing galleries were packed with alien cadets and even some instructors who had come to watch. Instructor Kravex stood at the center of the arena holding a data pad that would record the fight for later analysis. His red eyes glowed as he looked back and forth between the two fighters, and Hyun-woo could see something that might have been curiosity in the reptilian instructor's expression. "The rules are simple," he announced in his deep voice. "Fight until one opponent submits or is unable to continue. No weapons, no outside assistance. This is a test of your natural combat abilities. Use whatever skills you possess to achieve victory." Thane moved to one side of the fighting circle and began stretching his massive arms while his claws extended and retracted in a display meant to intimidate his opponent. The crowd made approving sounds as they watched the Vorthak warrior prepare for what they expected to be an easy victory against the weak. Human Hyun-woo took his position on the opposite side of the circle, trying to calm his racing heart and focus on everything he had learned about Vorthak anatomy during their academic sessions. He knew their pressure points, their weak spots, and their typical fighting patterns, but knowing something intellectually was very different from using it in actual combat. The signal to begin came from Instructor Kravex, and Thane immediately charged forward with surprising speed for such a large creature. His strategy was simple: use his superior size and strength to overwhelm his opponent quickly before the human could figure out any kind of defensive plan. The first exchange went exactly as everyone expected. Thane's massive fist caught Hyun-woo in the chest and sent him flying backward to crash into the arena wall. The impact drove all the air from his lungs and left him gasping while the crowd cheered for more violence. The Vorthak warrior followed, up immediately, with a series of claw strikes that would have been fatal in real combat. But something strange happened as the beating continued. Every time Thane expected his opponent to stay down and submit, Hyun-woo would somehow find the strength to get back up His nose was bleeding. His training uniform was torn and his breathing was labored, but he kept returning to a fighting stance. This unexpected resilience began to frustrate Thane beyond reason. In Vorthak culture, defeated opponents were supposed to acknowledge their superior and submit gracefully when they could no longer continue fighting. Hyun Woo's stubborn refusal to give up was seen as a personal insult that demanded harsh correction. The crowd began calling for the human to be taught his proper place in the galactic hierarchy. Their cheers turned bloodthirsty as they urged Thane to deliver more punishment. Some of them were making bets on how much damage the human could take before he finally broke down and begged for mercy. Hyun Woo absorbed another series of devastating strikes that left him on his hands and knees trying to clear his vision. Everything hurt, and he could taste blood in his mouth, but somewhere deep inside, a voice was telling him to get up and keep fighting. His body wanted to quit, but his mind refused to accept defeat. Thane stood over him, breathing heavily from exertion and growing anger. "Why will you not submit, human?" he snarled. "You cannot win this fight. You have no chance of victory. Accept your defeat with honor and this can end. Now, instead of answering." Hyun Woo pushed himself back to his feet and raised his hands in a defensive position. His legs were shaky and his vision was blurred, but he was not ready to give up. The crowd fell silent as they watched this display of either incredible bravery or complete stupidity. That was when Thane decided that simply winning was not enough. The human needed to be humiliated in front of everyone so that no other member of this weak species would dare challenge a real warrior again. He approached his opponent with the clear intention of delivering a finishing blow that would end any thoughts of continued resistance. Hyun Woo tried to dodge, but his reflexes were too slow after taking so much punishment. Thane's massive hand caught him across the face with a slap that echoed through the silent arena like a thunderclap. The force of the blow sent him crashing to the floor, where he lay motionless, while stars exploded behind his closed eyelids. The arena fell completely silent as Thane stood over his defeated opponent with satisfaction written across his alien features. He turned toward the crowd and raised both arms in premature victory celebration, while his back was now turned to the human he assumed was finished. But Hyun Woo was not finished. Something had awakened inside him when that humiliating slap connected something that had been sleeping in his human DNA for generations. His ancestors had survived on a world where everything tried to kill them, and they had developed instincts that could be triggered under extreme stress. His eyes opened, but they no longer held the uncertain gaze of a struggling cadet. Instead, they showed something cold and calculating that the aliens had never seen before. The crowd began to notice the change first as whispers spread through the viewing galleries about the humans. Strange stillness. Thane heard the whispers and started to turn back toward his opponent, just as Hyun Woo began to rise from the arena floor. But this was not the same clumsy, defeated human who had been absorbing punishment for the past several minutes. This was something else entirely. Every muscle in Hyun Woo's body had become focused on a single primitive objective that overrode conscious thought. Pain, fear, and exhaustion disappeared as his human instincts took complete control. His movements became fluid and predatory in a way that seemed impossible for someone who had appeared helpless just moments before. Thane sensed the change too late. As he turned back toward his supposedly defeated opponent, Hyun Woo was already moving with speed and precision that defied everything the aliens thought they knew about human physical capabilities. The combat training he had absorbed, combined with awakened human potential, created something the galaxy had never witnessed before. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the human they had dismissed as weak and pathetic suddenly became something far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. Time seemed to slow down as Hyun Woo rose from the arena floor with movements that looked more like a predator than a defeated cadet. The crowd in the viewing galleries had gone completely silent, sensing that something fundamental had changed. In the fight below them, even the veteran instructors leaned forward in their seats as they watched the transformation taking place. Thane was still turning when Hyunwoo moved, and the Vorthak warrior suddenly found himself facing an opponent who no longer looked anything like the clumsy human he had been beating for the past several minutes. Every trace of uncertainty and fear had vanished from Hyunwoo's eyes, replaced by something cold and focused that made even the massive alien take an involuntary step backward. The first strike came faster than anyone thought possible for a human. Hyunwoo's hand shot out with surgical precision, targeting a nerve cluster at the base of Thane's neck that he had memorized during their anatomy lessons. The impact was perfectly placed and delivered with force that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside his human genetics. Thane staggered backward in shock as pain shot through his nervous system, but before he could recover, Hyunwoo was already moving again. His second strike hit a pressure point just below the Vorthak's armored ribcage, causing the massive warrior to double over as his breathing became difficult. The alien spectators watched in growing amazement as the human who had been helpless moments before began systematically dismantling an opponent twice his size. Every strike was perfectly placed, targeting weaknesses that most fighters would never think to exploit. Hyunwoo moved like he had been studying Vorthak anatomy. His entire life, Thane tried to fight back, swinging his massive fists toward the human, but his movement seemed slow and clumsy compared to Hyunwoo's newfound speed and precision. Every attack missed as the human flowed around the strikes, like water finding openings that had not existed seconds before. The third strike targeted a cluster of nerves behind Thane's left knee, causing his leg to buckle unexpectedly. As the Vorthak warrior struggled to maintain his balance, Hyunwoo stepped inside his guard and delivered a series of rapid hits to pressure points along his spine. Each impact was calculated to cause maximum disruption to his opponent's nervous system. By now, the crowd was on their feet, trying to understand what they were. Witnessing the weak, pathetic human who had been absorbing punishment without fighting back had suddenly become something that looked more dangerous than any warrior they had ever seen. His movements were too fast, too precise, and too ruthless for someone who was supposed to be an inferior species. Thane was beginning to panic as he realized that he could no longer control the fight. Every time he tried to use his superior size and strength against the human, those advantages seemed meaningless. Hyunwoo was staying too close for the longer reach to matter, and hitting places that even light impacts caused serious problems. The fourth strike hit a nerve center in Thane's right shoulder, causing his arm to go completely numb. His claws retracted involuntarily as sensation disappeared from his fingers. The massive Vorthak tried to grab his opponent with his left hand, but Hyunwoo simply was not there when the grasping fingers closed on empty air instructor. Kravex watched from the center of the arena with growing fascination as his experienced warrior instincts recognized something that the younger spectators were missing. This was not just improved fighting technique or hidden training. The human had undergone some kind of fundamental change that was allowing him to access abilities that should not have been possible. The fifth and final strike was the most precise of all. Hyunwoo seemed to flow upward as Thane bent forward trying to protect his damaged nerve centers. His hand moved with mechanical accuracy toward a specific point at the base of the Vorthak's skull, where the spine connected to the brainstem. It was a target that required perfect knowledge of alien anatomy and inhuman precision to hit correctly. The impact lasted exactly 1 second, but the force behind it was unlike anything the human had demonstrated before. Every ounce of frustration, anger, and determination that had been building inside him for weeks focused into that single devastating blow. His hand connected with Thane's skull at precisely the right angle and with exactly the right amount of force. The sound echoed through the silent arena like breaking stone. Thane's massive body went rigid for a moment as his nervous system tried to process what had happened to it. Then his legs collapsed, and he crashed to the arena floor with enough force to shake the viewing galleries. His skull had multiple fractures, and his eyes had rolled back to show only the white Hyun-woo stood over his defeated opponent, breathing heavily as the primitive fury slowly faded from his consciousness. He looked around the arena in confusion, as if he was not entirely sure how he had gotten there or what he had just accomplished. The cold, calculating predator disappeared, leaving behind a 19-year-old human who seemed as surprised as everyone else. The medical team rushed onto the arena floor to check on Thane, while the crowd remained in shocked silence, trying to process what they had witnessed. In 5 seconds, everything they thought they knew about human capabilities had been completely overturned. The weak inferior species had just demonstrated a capacity for violence that none of their warrior cultures had ever developed. Instructor Kravex approached Hyun-woo with something that looked like respect in his reptilian features. His experienced eyes had recognized the transformation for what it really was: not hidden training or secret techniques, but the awakening of evolutionary instincts that most species had never developed. The human capacity for sudden, overwhelming violence when pushed beyond their limits was something that the galactic military had never encountered before. Most alien species fought with honor codes and established patterns that could be studied and countered, but humans seemed to have no limits when their survival instincts took control. As the medical team worked to stabilize Thane, the crowd slowly began to disperse, but the whispers and discussions would continue for days. What they had seen challenged everything they believed about the hierarchy of species in the galaxy. The supposedly weak humans had hidden depths that made them far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Word of the incident spread through the Academy within hours and would reach the highest levels of the Galactic Defense Force before the day was over. Military analysts would begin reviewing human history with new understanding of what this species was really capable of when pushed to their breaking point. For Hyun-woo, the fight marked the end of his time as the Academy weakling and the beginning of something entirely new. He had proven that humans belonged among the galaxy's warriors, but the method of that proof had raised new questions about what humanity might become when their true nature was finally unleashed. The other human cadets looked at him with a mixture of pride and concern, wondering if they all carried the same potential for sudden violence, hidden somewhere in their genetic makeup. The galaxy was about to learn that underestimating humans could be a fatal mistake for anyone foolish enough to push them too far. As the arena finally emptied, Hyun-woo realized that nothing would ever be the same for him or for the way the galaxy viewed his species. The weak, pathetic humans had just announced their presence as a force to be respected and feared by anyone with the intelligence to recognize what they had witnessed. Thane's massive body hit the arena floor with a sound like falling timber, his skull fractured from impacts that had been delivered with mechanical precision and inhuman force. The arena fell into shocked silence as medics rushed to tend to the defeated Vorthak warrior. Hyun-woo stood over his opponent, breathing heavily as the primitive fury slowly faded from his eyes, replaced by confusion at what he had just accomplished. The crowd of alien spectators sat in stunned disbelief. In 5 seconds, every assumption they had made about human weakness had been completely shattered. The species they had dismissed as soft and inferior had just demonstrated a capacity for sudden, overwhelming violence that none of their warrior cultures had ever developed. Their structured, honorable combat traditions had no defense against the unleashed fury of a cornered human. Instructor Kravex approached the arena floor with new respect evident in his massive reptilian features. His experienced warrior's eye had recognized something that the younger cadets had missed. Humans weren't weak because they lacked natural armor or claws. They were dangerous specifically because they appeared harmless until pushed beyond their breaking point. Their deceptive appearance was actually a form of evolutionary camouflage that concealed their true potential. Word of the incident spread throughout the Academy within hours and reached the Galactic Defense Force command structure within days. Military analysts began reviewing human history with growing amazement and concern. The species they had dismissed, as primitive had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare against their own kind. Their entire evolutionary development had been shaped by constant conflict that would have destroyed more civilized species. The treatment of human cadets at the academy changed overnight. No longer seen as weak links or sources of entertainment, they were now viewed with careful respect by species who understood that appearances could be fatally deceptive. Training programs were modified to account for human psychological triggers, and instructors learned to recognize the warning signs that preceded human combat transformation. For Hyun-woo and his fellow human cadets, the incident marked the beginning of a new chapter in human-galactic relations. They were no longer trying to prove they deserved to be there. Instead, the galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their physical capabilities or their technology. It was in their absolute refusal to surrender when everything seemed hopeless, and their capacity to find victory even in the face of seemingly impossible odds. The Galaxy had gained a new understanding of what it truly meant to fight beside humans.